Welcome again to the Hebrew Point of View.
And today we're going to be talking about the Lucifer myth, which is this the second one or third one?
It's the second in the series.
Second, yeah.
It's a series of 5 books written about the rise of Satan and our understanding of Satan in the biblical text.
Right.
But this one deals with the name Lucifer. But before we go any further, again, we have to understand that any consideration, any study of the biblical text must take into consideration the fact that it is a Hebrew document.
Yeah.
It's a Hebrew book, written in Hebrew, written by Hebrews, in a Hebrew understanding, with a Hebrew worldview, using Hebrew figures of speech. And we have to always bear that in mind to prevent ourselves inserting our Western ideology, our Western understanding and point of view into the biblical text. Treating it as a Hebrew document written in the Hebrew language enables us to go back into the time, into the culture and the context.
I think context is big here.
Exactly,
right?
in which
because
it
if you
was
don't
written.
know the context of anything, actually, if you're researching anything or looking at anything, you have to know the context in which it was written on that day, right?
Right, and knowing that it's Hebrew and understanding that it's written in Hebrew enables us to go back to that context.
Yeah. Now that may be a thing that people don't even remember or were taught, that this book that we're talking about, the biblical text, is a Hebrew book.
Right.
So that's important to know.
Yeah. So we are going to go back all the way to Babylon. Actually, before Babylon. We're going to go back 200 years before Babylon.
Right, we're going to read out of
The
Isaiah.
Babylonian exile. And we're going to talk about the scripture that has caused all of this discussion and debate and caused theologians to argue and interpret and translate it in so many different ways. It's become one of the most important subjects for us to study and one of the least studied.
You say here, interestingly, this iconic name most famously appears for the first time in the 4th century in the Latin Vulgate translation of Isaiah 14:12. That's very interesting.
Let's begin there.
Yeah.
Let's begin with the name Lucifer. You do not find it anywhere in Torah until the 4th century, where the verse in Isaiah chapter 14 verse 12 is translated into Latin.
Yeah, and you do deal with that.
The question of this book, and the question this book asks, is this: how did a name that's mentioned only once in the biblical text become so important and so dominant in our thinking and become the name given to Satan, the personal name of Satan? A word or a name that appears only once in the biblical text, and that under questionable translations, circumstances. And we're going to go into that in the course of these next discussions. So we're going to take a look at Isaiah chapter 14 and verse 12, if you will read that for us.
And I am reading out of the Amplified Bible. It says, "How are you fallen from heaven, O light bringer and day star, son of the morning? How you are cut down to the ground, you who weakened and laid." It doesn't really matter about that rest of the text, because we are concentrating here, I believe.
On the first part.
Yeah. "How have you fallen, O light bringer and day star?"
So there the Amplified Bible
actually says it right, eh? Yeah.
A lot of the other translations, and in my book I've listed the translations and what they use. And many translations use the word or the name Lucifer at this point. How art thou fallen, O Lucifer? So we want to see how we get from day star, son of the morning, to Lucifer. I'm going to quickly read it out of the Hebrew text, because that's where we're going to begin. It's a Hebrew document. Let's start with the Hebrew text. And it says in the Hebrew text, Ik nafalta mashamayim Hillel ben Shachar. How art thou fallen from heaven, Hillel ben Shachar? I want us to remember that Hebrew, or those Hebrew words, because that is what this whole discussion is going to center around. In my study, I have used the Polyglot Bible. I did that for a specific reason. The Polyglot Bible has the biblical text in 4 different languages side by side. So you can read the Hebrew Masoretic Text, the Greek Septuagint, the Latin Vulgate, and another language in which this book is published. In this case, it's German. We're going to disregard the German, but we're going to look at the Hebrew Masoretic Text, the Greek Septuagint, and the Latin Vulgate. Because between these 3 translations, something extremely important happens in the translation of this verse in Isaiah chapter 14, verse 12. So, we started with the Hebrew. Ik nafalta mashamayim Hillel ben Shachar. How art thou fallen from heaven, Hillel ben Shachar? So, what is the translation of Hillel ben Shachar? The Amplified Bible gives it to us as it is translated from the Hebrew. Just read it again.
It says, O light bringer and day star, son of the morning.
O light bringer, day star, son of the morning. So that actual description in the Amplified Bible comes from both the Masoretic Text and the Greek Septuagint.
Which sounds correct to me.
Right. And we'll get to that as we deal with each one of these in turn. We're going to start with the Masoretic Text.
Now, just before you say, where does the Masoretic Text come from? What is that?
The Masoretic Text is believed by scholars to be probably the most accurate Hebrew text that we have. Now, understanding, we don't have an original text. That we must understand. Everything we have is a translation. So the history of these translations occurs in this way. We begin way back in Babylon, prior to the Torah being written down, presumably by Ezra, the prophet Ezra. We move from the oral transmission of Torah to a written transmission of Torah, but we don't have that original writing. We don't have that copy.
No, you mean it doesn't exist?
Well, it's been destroyed. It's lost in antiquity. It's gone.
Okay.
The next best translation we have at our disposal, and there may be others that I'm unaware of, but as far as I know, the next best translation that we as the regular people, the man in the street, the students today, can use is the Hebrew Masoretic Text. It was written and translated and copied by the Masoretes, who inserted into the text the vowel points that help us to understand the Hebrew. So as I'm reading Hebrew in this Bible, there are little vowel points under the consonants that help me to decipher what the sound of that letter indicates. From the Masoretic Text, we go forward to the Greek Septuagint. Septuagint simply means 70. Tradition has it that this translation was done by 70 Jewish scholars in Alexandria. Then we go from the Greek Septuagint. The next important translation for us is the Latin Vulgate, which takes us all the way into the 4th century of the current era.
So the Latin Vulgate came from the Septuagint, or?
No, the Latin Vulgate was a translation in which Jerome used the Hebrew Masoretic Text, the Greek Septuagint, other Latin texts, other sources he put together the Latin Vulgate. And we're going to get to that. So in each of these studies, we're going to deal with each of these translations. So let's get to the Hebrew Masoretic Text.
Okay.
The Hebrew Masoretic Text, as we have already said, uses the words Hillel ben Shachar, bright shining son of the morning. To understand the meaning of this prophecy. So we've said before that this prophecy was made by Isaiah 200 years to 150 years before this historical event actually took place, that is prophesied here. We are reading this verse of scripture, we are reading this prophecy of Isaiah as a poetic record or prophecy of an historic event. That is so important for us to remember.
Now, of course, you're going to go into which historic event, right?
We're going to do that.
Yeah.
But I need to say this. It's only represented as a poetic prophecy of a historic event in the Masoretic text and in the Greek Septuagint. Nothing more. There's no other meaning applied to this text up until that point in time. So historically, this text is interpreted in the light of Hebrewisms, in the light of the fact that it is a Hebrew text written in Hebrew, utilizing poetic metaphors to talk about an historic event that is going to take place. The confirmation of that is the fact that this historic event was actually fulfilled. And we can read about the fulfillment of this event in Daniel chapter 5, which is the defeat of Babylon by Cyrus the Great of Persia, and the slaying of Belshazzar, the emperor or the king of Babylon,
At that time.
and ultimately leading to the
Fall.
freedom of the Jews from Babylonian exile.
Or the fall of Babylon, and then that brought the freedom.
So we have the fall of Babylon, which is an actual historic event, which did take place, in which the fulfillment of Isaiah chapter 14 verse 12 happens in absolute accordance with what he prophesied.
Yeah.
So what did he prophesy? He said, "How art thou fallen, O son of the morning?"
Yeah.
How is that applied to this historical event? And to interpret that, we have to know a little bit about Babylonian and ancient Near Eastern cosmology. And in the ancient Near East, countries, cities, areas, provinces were always associated with a deity, with some deity. In the case of Babylon, or in Mesopotamia, let's start there. Mesopotamia, the ruling, most important, most dominant deity in the Mesopotamian religions was the goddess Ishtar, also called Inanna. So she's written Ishtar or Inanna in different texts that you would read.
Yeah.
But Ishtar was the patron deity ruling over Babylon. Even though Marduk was the patron god of Babylon, kings and rulers identified themselves with Ishtar and Inanna.
Now I need to ask you something. Ishtar is a idol, right?
She
is it a planet?
Is a pagan goddess. She doesn't exist. It's a goddess.
Oh, so it's just their sort of imagination type of thing, or what?
Well, yeah, that's one way of putting it. These mythical gods and goddesses.
They practically made them up, right?
Yeah, they're mythical. They're myths.
Okay. Well, that's interesting.
But this mythical goddess was the goddess that ruled over Mesopotamia, the most important god or goddess in Mesopotamia, and she was the goddess of kingship, of war, of ascension, to greatness. And so kings and rulers and emperors would claim her patronage, the fact that she was looking over them. They relied upon her protection. She was the goddess of war. They relied upon her influence because she was the goddess of kings and of exaltation of rulers. So they lacked to identify with this goddess. And so the king of Babylon, Belshazzar, identifies with this goddess Inanna, identifies himself. And this god or this goddess is identified or connected to or referred to as the planet Venus or the morning star. And that's important. So here we have the origin of this prophecy, this name in the prophecy, Hillel ben Shachar, referring to the planet Venus, the morning star, great, bright, shining sun of the morning. That was the accepted Hebrew description of this morning star. It was also the same description that was in the Greek, and we'll go into that when we look at the Greek Septuagint. But this goddess, this identification with the planet Venus is what Isaiah is referring to. Now, why does Isaiah choose this metaphor, this way to express or to describe the king of Babylon? What does Belshazzar say about himself? So I want Gail to read that from the Amplified Bible, what he says about himself.
Okay, so I can read from verse 13, and it says, "And you said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit upon the mount of assembly in the uttermost north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High."
And that is what verse?
That's 13 and 14.
Okay, so that's
same chapter.
Isaiah chapter 14,
13 and 14.
Verse 13 and 14, following on from "How art thou fallen from heaven, O bright shining sun of the morning."
Okay, so just so that we can go back on verse 12, how art you fallen from heaven? We are talking about Belshazzar over here.
We're talking about the king of Babylon, Belshazzar.
Okay, we need to make that clear.
Who is identified by Ishtar, who represents or is represented by Venus, the morning star.
All right.
Belshazzar says of himself, "I will rise above the stars of heaven." He exalts himself. This is not unique to Belshazzar, by the way. The Mesopotamian kings and the kings of the ancient Near East all did this. They said that about themselves. Although they didn't treat themselves as gods as the Egyptian pharaohs did, they associated themselves with deities and exalted themselves under the name of that deity. So why, again, we ask the question, why does Isaiah choose this metaphor of Venus to compare to Belshazzar, who is about to be destroyed? That's what the prophecy is about. It's about the destruction of Belshazzar and his kingdom that has exalted itself against the God of Israel.
Yeah.
Now remember, this is 200 years before it happens. This is a prophecy from Isaiah prophesying about a historical event before Belshazzar or Cyrus the Great is even born. So it just shows how accurate and how applicable Scripture is in predicting these historical events. And we see this event actually unfolding, and we see the fulfillment of this prophecy. So there's no doubt that this prophecy is fulfilled in its minutest detail, which is so incredible.
Very interesting.
So why does Isaiah choose Venus, the morning star? Well, in the light of the ancient Near East understanding and religion, Venus, the morning star, is the brightest and most illuminated star the most brilliant star that rises in the morning, which outshines every other star. However, that brilliance and that outshining of the other stars lasts only for a time, because the planet Venus, the morning star, Hillel ben Shachar, is outshone by the rising sun. So we have this star rising and exalting itself in brilliance and brightness, but then when the sun rises, this beautiful morning sun rising in the east, it overshadows, outshines Venus, which Isaiah is now trying to make a point. He's making a metaphorical comparison between a king exalting himself in all his own self-glory and his self-importance, just as the star or the planet Venus, the morning star, rises in all of its brilliance, but is outshone by the rising sun, and the planet disappears and its brilliance fades, and it ceases to be what it claims to be. And here Belshazzar, the king who exalts himself up against God, when compared to God himself, the rising sun is overshadowed and is cast into darkness. It fades away. The glory disappears.
Of course, this was his downfall.
His pride and arrogance. Yeah. So what Isaiah is saying here is, you can be as proud and as arrogant as you want, but compared to God, when God begins to shine, your arrogance disappears and you will fade and you will be cast down into the pit, as this prophecy goes on to say. So the comparison is apt. It's a fantastic comparison of a king rising to eminence and glory and being cast down. And that's what Isaiah is saying about Belshazzar. You may say that you're rising. You may say that you are this and that and going to rise above the stars of heaven, and you're going to rise above the Most High God. But I'm telling you, this is what's going to happen. You are going to be cast down. And if you read the rest of Isaiah in that chapter 14, it says you are cast down into the pit. And the rulers of the world, the kings, look at you and saying, are you the one that caused the earth to tremble? You are cast down and covered in worms. Just read what it says about him. So Isaiah is saying, Belshazzar, this is your future. You exalted yourself to brilliance, but you're going to be cast down from your position of glory into the pit, which is why Isaiah uses this term Hillel ben Shachar. It is an ancient Near Eastern poetic portrayal of a king rising to glory and being defeated, being cast down. That is the historical, that is the fact behind this prophecy, that is the reason for Isaiah's prophecy and prophesying in this way and in this manner.
So in verse 12, when he's talking about how have you fallen from heaven, and some of the interpretations mention the word Lucifer there, it was, where did they get that from?
Okay, we're going to get to the word Lucifer. So right now, Hillel ben Shachar is the only translation that is mentioned by Isaiah. When we get to the Greek Septuagint, which we're going to do in our next session, we find that there are 70 Jewish scholars who are selected, actually 72, 6 from each of the tribe, each tribe of Israel, and they sit down together. But remember, these Jewish scholars are much closer to the language, much closer to the context, much closer to the meaning of Scripture at that point in time. So this is in probably the 2nd or 3rd century when this takes place under the rule of Alexander the Great, but we'll get to that in our next session. So the name Lucifer has not appeared yet. the concept of Hillel ben Shachar as being a proper name to describe a devil or a Satan has not appeared yet. We haven't got that far. It is not yet a concept in the biblical text. So important to remember.
Yeah.
This whole concept of Satan does not begin in Genesis.
Yeah.
This concept is only developed in the 4th century of the current era. People don't understand that. The story of Satan did not arrive in its complete package. We did not just get it from the scriptures and that's what the scriptures say. This concept of Satan is not a biblical concept. It's so far removed from what this text in Isaiah has to say. It is not what Isaiah was referring to. He was referring to a historical king who existed. So this concept came to us through centuries of translation and interpretation. So we have to watch how this whole concept of this evil being an adversary to God and God's program upon this earth develops through Scripture. One thing we have established in this first section now is that up until this point in time, there is no concept of a spiritual, external spiritual, supernatural opponent to God called Satan, devil, or Lucifer, or any of those names. He does not exist at this point in time.
Okay, great.
And I think we need to bring this to a close here. In our next session, we're going to talk about the Greek Septuagint. You don't want to miss that. It's so important.
Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next one.
Shalom.